Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about being human and invite you, the listener, to become more present to yourself, your relationships, and your life. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, you can send that to me anonymously at asksean.org. So in this video, I want to explore a series of questions, topics that kind of all feel related to me. So questions like, is it ever good to repress our emotions? Should we always listen to our emotions? Are our emotions always telling the truth? Are they infallible? Should we ignore our emotions? Are they totally obnoxious, ridiculous things that have nothing to offer us? So let's explore these together and kind of we'll start with just kind of playing around with the extremes. So, on one end of the continuum, right, there would be schools of thought that, would suggest that emotions are irrational, that they are unreliable, that they don't really have much, maybe or maybe not anything to offer. That we should get our thinking in line and our emotions will follow. And that, that largely emotions are to be controlled, suppressed, gotten in line, right? I'm painting a very extreme caricature, of one end of the continuum, right? There's lots of degrees in between. The other extreme, caricature on the other end, right, would be that our emotions are always telling us the truth. We should always do what our emotions are telling us, that our emotions can do no wrong, that these are sacred truth, right? And that they should dictate everything. So as with many things, I think wisdom and the truth of things is in the middle, is in this sort of interweaving of these extremes. So I do think that our emotions have things to teach us. I do think that they are valid and valuable. And they're not very accurate representations of reality, or present reality in particular. They are often, the truthfulness of our emotions is often speaking to layers of complexity way beyond sort of kind of an immediate surface concrete situation, right? So say I'm driving on the road and somebody drives past me and seems like they're making a face or something. Well, there's all kinds of meaning I can make out of that, right? Like I can imagine that they're, thinking I'm a stupid driver. I can imagine that they are trying to provoke me or something. I could also imagine that, they're scared and they're running away from, trouble or something, right? That would be a very different scenario. The reality is I have no clue, what's actually going on with them. So if emotions get stirred up for me, like say there's something about their expression that evokes something from my history, well, that's not giving me reliable data about what actually is happening in that moment. All I know is the person made a face as they drove by. I don't even know if they're looking at me. They could be seeing something past me, like on the other side of me, right? That they're frowning at, that maybe evokes something for them. I have no freaking clue. And in this, example, I'm not going to find out, right? Like, unless I happen to know this person later, I can be like, hey, so what was going on when you drove by me? And they'd be like, oh, I didn't even see you. I was thinking about such and such, that I had, left something at home and was, frowning about that, or, unless I know the person, it's unlikely that I'm going to run into them and get to ask this kind of question. And yet, totally like suppressing, repressing emotions, we'll continue with this example. That's problematic because it's not acknowledging that there's energy there, right? Like I need to metabolize that energy. If I had some shame come up in response to my interpretation about, this person's expression, right? I need to metabolize that. I need to do something with that. And, that moment might not be the time where that's best for me to do, right? Like maybe I'm on the way to an important meeting. And so there can be a sense in which I may need to say this needs to wait, which I would make the distinction there between a repression, suppression, and granted, we can use words differently, right? So I'm not going to die on this hill. I don't like using the word repress or suppress with regards to emotion, because that, I feel like my sense is that in our culture that has tended to mean like a total suppression, a total repression, like an invalidating of emotion, which I don't think that's useful. And I don't think it's truthful. Like emotions are telling us things, but it requires a lot of interpretation. It requires a lot of wisdom to make sense of, well, what are my emotions telling me? So I'm not a fan of repression, suppression, but I do like the idea of, it's like asking emotions to wait their turn, right? To kind of pivot my example here, if I'm riding a horse, I do horseback riding. If you've been following me, you know that. If I'm coming up on a jump, that is not the time to be processing my childhood trauma, right? Like that is a great way to end up hurt, right? Like I need to be focused on the task at hand. And so there is a appropriate inhibition of emotion in that time, right? Like because not out of a demeaning of emotion or a minimizing, but out of this is not the time for this. Like right now, all of my energy, all of my attention needs to be focused on me and the horse and the jump and what's beyond the jump. Like I need to be in the zone of riding through the jump. And it doesn't mean there isn't emotion present, right? Like I usually have at least a little bit of fear, sometimes a lot of fear. So that is with me. But if I stop and give all of my attention to that, well, I can't do the jump. Like those are two very different activities. There is a time for giving attention to the fear and being with the fear in a more focused way. But that is a different activity, right, than I'm about to do this jump. So I need to be able to acknowledge and be aware that, like, yes, there is fear in me. And I need to be able to say to that fear, I'll be with you in a minute or in an hour or whatever the case may be, right? Like I need to have the capacity to ask it to wait and to have that actually be effective, right? So I'm not trying to suggest this is necessarily easy. Like this is something we have to build up the capacity for. So this is a key thing, right? I think this is an important nuance where it's not a wholesale suppression, ignoring, minimizing, demeaning of emotion. But it is saying there's a time and a place for being with various emotions in a fuller, more focused way. And that's not every moment, right? And the reality is this is happening all the time. We always have so many different things going on inside of us. And so our responsibility as humans is to grow in our capacity to choose, what am I going to give my attention to right now? What do I think is most fruitful and most appropriate to this moment, to this context? I think about this in my friendships, right? In my various relationships. Not every relationship can hold space for the same things, right? Like I have a whole breadth of friendships and close relationships of different kinds and qualities and whatnot, and they're all lovely people. And so there are some friends where we can go certain places together, but not other places, and other relationships where we can go certain places, but not other places. And I have some relationships where we can go very many places together, and that's certainly lovely, right? Like I think that's a gift. But the other relationships where maybe there's certain limits on where we can go, whether it's family relationships, friendships, whatever, doesn't mean those can't be rich and meaningful relationships. But I have to be realistic about what is possible. And some of that even is moment specific, right? Like I could have a given moment with a friend or them with me, right? Where in that moment, one or the other of us doesn't have as much capacity as we might sometimes have. And so in that moment, it wouldn't make sense to go certain places emotionally, relationally, because it's like that's asking more of that moment than the moment collectively can hold, right? It's like if I'm really, I have times where it's like I'm really tired and I have to tell myself like, Sean, just go to bed. Like you will feel better in the morning and you can, process these emotions better in the morning, but like you're exhausted, you don't feel good. This is not the time to be doing deep emotional work, right? Like that's just asking for a meltdown, right? Like for all the young wounded parts to just, kind of take over and, make a mess, so to speak. So there is, again, this principle of there's a time and a place for things. And so that takes wisdom. It's hard to, I think it's hard to articulate that process, right, of cultivating this wisdom. But I'm going to, I think, keep coming back to that word because I think it's the best way I can think to describe it, right? As the word, this is all about cultivating wisdom. So then we also want to think about, I just lost my thought. It flew right out of my brain. Let me trace my steps. So we're talking about time and a place. Oh my goodness. Speaking of being tired. Jeepers, come on, brain. Right. Trustworthy. That was where I was wanting to go. This is what I get for not having an outline. So thinking about are our emotions trustworthy? So I would argue, I believe that our emotions are valid and they have a kind of truthfulness to them, but it's not in this nice, easy, I'm feeling upset, therefore this person hurt me, or I'm feeling ashamed, therefore this person shamed me, right? Like it's a lot more complicated than that. And again, the phrase, this takes wisdom. We have to learn how to interpret our emotions. So there is a kind of I guess I want to say a strong vibe in our culture right now of, I think, lacking discernment about emotions. I think it's in response to the ways in which older generations, I think, did suppress emotions in an unhelpful way. Like they never got around to dealing with emotions in some ways. I mean, that's again a broad caricature. But I think we've swung too far the other way, where it's like, okay, it's emotions all the time, and we're finding that doesn't really work. Like it. We do not seem to be becoming a more resilient culture. And we're seeing this in the younger generations, right? Like we're telling them to give more and more and more attention to their emotions, and they just seem to be getting more and more anxious and more depressed and more overwhelmed. So don't misunderstand me, I do not think that the answer is, well, we should be teaching adults and kids to just ignore their emotions. I do think we have to cultivate a discernment about how to interpret our emotions, how to make sense of what our emotions mean in a given moment. And that is a very different relationship, right, with our emotions. So if on the one extreme, one's relationship with their emotions is kind of one of ignoring, giving no interaction at all, you just lock them in the basement, becomes problematic, I would argue. At the other extreme is, we don't have any boundaries with our emotions, and so our emotions just run amok. And I think this is particularly challenging for children, right? Because part of, going through childhood is like you're supposed to be learning how to be with your emotions and how to have discernment and wisdom with regards to emotions, how to work with them, how to metabolize them, and how to, in a sense, guide them in a way. Because sometimes our emotions are just freaked out parts of us that need care, that need shepherding, but not in the sense of like, okay, I got to shut down everything in my life because of this, but in the sense of, like if it's like, going back to the horseback riding analogy, it's like I'm coming up on the jump and adult me knows we can do this jump. We're ready. Like it's not like we're doing a crazy, height or anything. Like this is a jump we've done many times. This is well within, the realm of possibility. And so in that moment, any part of me that's scared needs some coaching, some kind but firm coaching from the grounded adult me to say, hey buddy, it's okay to be scared, but we're doing the freaking jump. Like we're not going to bail on this. Like this isn't we can spend more time later, processing if there's underlying stuff. But in a sense, we're going to do this anyway, right? It would not help the scared part of me if I was like, oh my gosh, a part of me scared, and like I'm just pulling the reins on the horse, and then the horse is freaked out, like what's going on? Why are we scared? Why is the rider scared? Right? Like that's a great way to descend into chaos, right? That's a great way to destabilize oneself. So what's needed is I need to be in relationship with my emotions, right? But I need to shepherd them. I need to guide them. I need to parent them. I need to help them know that like I'm going to be okay. And even if I don't have answers to all of the questions that my emotions or my parts have, like I need to be grounded in that adult knowledge that I will be okay. Even if things go badly, I will be okay, right? Like, so this isn't a promise of perfection. This isn't a promise that things will necessarily feel good, right? Like, I think about the various number of times that my car has broken down. I've had various car adventures this year in particular, but also in past years. I've talked about some of those here on the channel. Like the one of the particularly scary ones was getting run off the road and tire blowing out, and trying to not die. And so there can be like all sorts of things going wrong, and that's inconvenient, and it can be scary, it can be uncomfortable. But there's a kind of visceral okayness that we need to cultivate. And this is not easy. Like, I'm not trying to say, just think yourself into feeling better, right? Like there's a lot of work that can be involved in cultivating this capacity. But this is what we're invited to aspire to, I would suggest, right? Is to be developing this internal sense of somehow I'm going to be okay. Somehow I'm going to get through, right? This is not a fanciful, like everything's going to be great. It'd be like, no, I mean, a lot of things might suck. And I've had plenty of things, again, thinking about just, car examples that have sucked. I've had experiences, on horseback where I have fallen off, and that's not fun, like I'm not like, yay, let me try to fall off today. Like that's a really jarring experience. That's a little bit dangerous. Like, no, that's like, I'm not looking to fall. Like I would like to avoid that. Right. So it's not a promise to ourselves that things will go the way that we want, or that things will be pleasant, or that we'll be happy even, right? But it's this rootedness that I have gotten through so many other hard things. I'm going to get through whatever's next. And so I can keep moving forward, and I can take the next step. And even though parts of me are scared or upset or ashamed or whatever, we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to do the jump. We're going to do the damn jump, right? Like we're going to stay on course, right? We're not going to derail our life because parts of us are worked up, right? That doesn't mean that I'm not going to periodically spend intentional time with these parts, right? Like if parts are continuing to get activated, then it's like, okay, there is stuff there for me to work on. And so this brings us back to that element where there is a kind of truthfulness to our emotions. It's just not truthful or accurate in terms of the present moment entirely, right? Like I have to spend time with my emotions, with the parts of me, the parts of my psyche, to untangle how much of this is about today and how much of it is about 20 years ago, right? I mean, using horseback riding for, as an example, I think I've shared this before in the channel. I had a childhood kind of traumatic experience where a trainer who honestly was, in retrospect, was unwise, and they tried to get the horse to do that I was riding to do something that the horse was not prepared to do, and the horse bucked me off. And it was really scary. It was physically dangerous, and it made an impression on me. I already was afraid of horses, but that greatly intensified it. And I had a lifelong fear of horses until I reapproached working with horses here in recent years, and have intentionally been working through that fear. So it's in any given moment of feeling fear in regards to a horse or on horseback or a jump or whatever, right? That can be layered, right? That can be partly about the present, but I have to spend some time with it to untangle how much is about the present and how much is about the past. And it's not about getting an exact answer there. It's about, I do want to be with whatever's there and help it metabolize through. But I always have to, kind of in a sense, be suspicious of my emotions, right? Not suspicious in the sense that they are nonsense, but suspicious in the sense of, I don't necessarily know immediately how much of this is telling me accurate information about right now. It may be telling me something about right now, maybe a lot about right now, but I may have to spend some time with it depending on how, and honestly, the more intense the emotion, the more I'm going to be suspicious. I mean, I think that would be one kind of principle here. I mean, it's a little tricky. It's not that intensity automatically means it's coming from old wounds. I think it does increase the probability. You could have something that's predominantly about the present and have intense emotion about it. It's gonna have, I think, and this is where words are so insufficient. There's a different quality to when that is really coming from a grounded present place versus it's got charge to it from the past. There's a different feel to when past stuff is coming up, and I wish I had words to describe it. I know it when I feel it in myself. I know it when I experience it in others. There's kind of an edge. There's a sharpness. There's a bit of a survival quality to it. There often is a lack of compassion, a lack of softness, a lack of curiosity. That all of those things are indicators that this is something I haven't been able to fully be with, because it's narrowing in an unhelpful way, not in a focused way, but in a survival way. It's narrowing my range of vision. If we think about tunnel vision, right? I'm losing capacity for options and creativity. All of those are indicators that this is some history, at least in part. And I've got to deal with that history. I've got to spend some time with that to help that metabolize through, so that I can then come back to okay, is there also anything about the present that is useful here that my emotions are trying to tell me, right? Emotions do give us information, but it's a very fuzzy, kind of instrument or indicator, right? At its most basic, all our emotions tell us is that I'm feeling something. And it may have something to do with me. It may have something to do with a situation or another person. It may have something to do with my past. It may be all of the above, or, something else entirely, right? It requires investigation. So I think we are, I guess I want to say foolish, if we just treat our emotions as infallible, right? If we just say, well, I feel like this person hurt me, therefore they hurt me. Or I feel like I'm a terrible person, therefore I'm a terrible person. It's that, in storytelling, the idea of an unreliable narrator, right? That isn't, emotions are a terribly unreliable narrator. In terms of that kind of specificity, it's I don't know if that's true or not. I got to spend some time with that. And this is also where having healthy people in our life, right? Whether that is a counselor or a mentor, perhaps if you're in a religious tradition, it could be a religious leader, a family member, a friend. It doesn't matter what, label or category. What matters is what is their capacity, right, for being with their own emotions, And so somebody who is is practicing a way of life where they are able to be with their emotions and not be ruled by their emotions. Like they're able to actually care for their emotions, able to set limits on their emotions, able to learn from their emotions, all of the nuance and subtlety and wisdom of all of this, right? And then we get together with that person and we have conversation. We say, hey, I was feeling this, blah, 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 in such and such a situation with this person. And I can't figure out am I, is that my stuff? Like, are they trying to be mean? I don't know. Like what, I'm really not certain here. Like the hurt parts of me just want to be so mad at them. And how could they do this? But I don't even know for certain if they did anything at all. Like I haven't, like I need some help here. Can you help me work through this? Help me see through this. Right. And what we're not looking for here is, somebody who's just gonna agree with us and be like, oh yeah, they're a jerk, da 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 da, and you didn't do anything wrong. It's like, no, we want someone who has the capacity to be like, well, I could see where that may not have felt great. Like I wasn't there, so I don't know I haven't talked to them, so I don't know what their intention was. But it's also possible they were just distracted. And that still can be hurtful, but that's different than they're trying to be mean. They're trying to be hurtful, right? Or different scenario, different example could be like, yeah, I don't know. That sounds like a pretty reasonable thing on their end. I understand, knowing you, given your background, how that would hit some really sensitive areas. But I don't know that it's fair to expect them to know that, right? Like that's, how would they know that? That's not their responsibility. It doesn't mean that what's coming up for you isn't important, right? But that's ultimately, our pain is our responsibility, right? It's not the world's responsibility to take care of our pain. It's our responsibility. Now we can invite others to be with us in that and to help us grow in that, right? But we can't expect the world just isn't going to, despite what we want or how much we might protest, the world is not going to cater to our pain ultimately. It's just not going to happen. Whether that's right or not, it's what is. And I say that as somebody who has had plenty of places of pain where I have really wanted the world to bend to my will and to really be in certain ways towards me. And I've had to accept that that just isn't what is. And that, that's been painful and disappointing, but it's ultimately been very freeing because it's been part of my process of getting honest about what is in the present and what was in the past, and grieving really difficult things. And I've facing enough of that grief then that's freed me up to actually be able to have some peace in the present, as imperfect as the present can be. So again, I'm just kind of trying to see if I have any other pieces I want to touch on, but kind of recapitulating a bit, right? We need to have the capacity to set limits on our emotions, not in a shaming way, not in a dismissive way, but in a not right now, right? We need to be able to ask our emotions to wait. So that's a capacity that we have to build, right? How we build that, it takes time and practice with key people who have those emotional capacities themselves. So we need to be able to ask our emotions to wait. We need to be able to say, not now. So in a sense, we need to be able to give our attention to other things and have the capacity to sort of hold space for those emotions off to the side. If I'm in a session with a client and they share something that's like, oh, that evokes something from my own past, I need to have the capacity and the groundedness to be like, okay, well, I'm going to note that, and that's going to wait. I'm not going to pause the session so that I can process my own childhood trauma. That would be inappropriate. That would be unethical, right? I need to be able to set that aside for the moment. That's not denigrating my wounded parts. That's not shaming them. That's just saying, like we would to a kid, hey, buddy, not right now. You're going to have to wait. It's like, but I want to do it right now. I know, but it's not right now. This is not the time. I will spend time with you later. And then we have to be faithful about following through on that, right? That's where I think sort of suppression, repression words to me tend to connote kind of a pattern of ignoring emotion. And I don't think that's useful, right? We do need to spend time with the emotions, but we need to be able to do it from an adult place and kind of on our terms, right? You don't let the child rule the house. That is a great way to ruin a child and ruin a household. Like the child needs the adults to rule the house and to run the house, right? And that can be done in a very respectful and loving way, but it's like, children don't have the ability to make good decisions or make wise decisions. Like they need the adult to say, "No, you're going to eat your veggies, and then we're doing bath, and then we're going to bed." And it's like, the child being a child is going to, may resist all of that. And the parent needs to be able to be grounded enough to walk them through that, frustrating process and whatnot, and stay the parent and not be like, "Oh, well, if you don't want to eat, you don't have to. Oh, if you don't want to do bath, well, you don't have to. Oh, if it's too hard to," it's like, no, we got to do hard things. It's okay. You don't have to like it, but we're going to do it. And yeah, you can protest. That's fine. But we're still doing it, right? Like we need to have that kind of ability with ourselves. And I think one of the reasons that this is a weak area in our culture, in a lot of domains, is that, like I've talked about this in I think in other videos. Like we are a culture that really struggles with doing hard things. Like we haven't done enough difficult work with our own pain. And so then we spend a lot of time and energy sort of dancing around these sensitive areas. And we do that with each other. And we do that in parenting. We do that in partner relationships. We do that in our, jobs. And so it's all this sort of dancing around difficult emotions. And ironically, some of that can even be done in the name of trying to validate emotions. It's like, oh, somebody's feeling something. Let's just let that rule. But what we're missing there is that like that actually isn't helpful. Like what needs to happen is an acknowledgement of like, I care about the emotions that you're having, and this may not be the moment where we're going to deal with that. And yeah, you're going to need to hold on to that for a bit, and we will work with that later. Or there's 1,000 different permutations and examples. So I guess an underlying principle here is this compassion with responsibility, this compassion with limit setting, right? Like I think that's really kind of infused in everything that I'm talking about today, right? We need to be able to have a respect and compassion for our emotions, and this responsibility element of my emotions don't get to make decisions for me, right? Like in the sense that my decision making needs to come from my grounded self, which can have emotional qualities to it, but like not in the runaway train emotions, I guess is what I mean, right? Like, so I'm not saying we make decisions from emotionless places. Like I don't subscribe to that. Like we are all emotional creatures, and our decision making, I think in a lot of ways always has like an emotional quality to it. It's just, there's different categories or character or qualities of emotions. I don't even mean that like in sort of positive or negative, like, like a pejorative thing. I just mean like, it's not helpful if I have a wounded part coming up, like wounded emotions coming up. It's not helpful for me to let that dictate things, because again, it's like a flailing child, right? Like, you do not let that child drive the car. He doesn't know how to drive, right? Like, and he's not, coming from a grounded place. Like, we're going to run off a cliff or into a wall, which I have done many times, metaphorically speaking, right? Like, so that's those kinds of emotional places, those kinds of emotional states. Like they need help, they need care, they need compassion. They're valid and they matter. They aren't giving us accurate information about the present. They need to be cared for, and we need to be able to set limits on them. We need to be able to be like, all right, I will come back and we will work together. But right now I've got to focus on the jump in front of me, or we're going to end up, face first into the dirt, and that's no fun. So it's like, yeah, I hope you're catching kind of the complexity and the nuance here, right? That emotions do matter, but they're not infallible. They are important for us to spend time with, and our adult self needs to make decisions about that. And it's not just okay, it's good to say no to our emotions at times, right? Not perpetually forever, right? Just like you wouldn't say no forever to a child. It's like, no, I'm going to spend time with you. But we do need to say no at times. It's like, well, now it's time to, go to bed, or, now we're, whatever, waiting in line at something. And, like there's time and place for everything. And so we need to cultivate the capacities, right, to be able to navigate all that. So I realize in describing all this, I haven't necessarily said a whole lot about how we do this, right? I mean, I think it's implied in a lot of what I'm saying. I'm more so just kind of was wanting to play with these ideas about just, how should we pay attention to our emotions at all? Can we trust our emotions? Should we repress our emotions? Should we set limits on our emotions? All these sort of differing perspectives, right, about emotions, and trying to offer, I guess, a direction, right, in terms of that we can orient towards. The how we work on all this. I mean, I cover in other videos about, the process of healing, and obviously it's very relational. I mean, as I've alluded to in this video, like we need people with us who have these capacities and who can walk with us and who have the wisdom to kind of help us grapple with like times where it's like, where we need to say no to our emotions. I mean, I think this is one of the things I like about the structure of therapy. Not that therapy is, remotely the only place to do this work, but I like the structure of the therapy hour, right? There's something helpful about that container, about, that the hour will come to an end and we are going to pause. And though that can feel, to parts of us like, oh, I just want to have infinite time. I mean, part of me would like that. There's something actually really useful about, like, at some point we have to take a break, right? At some point I got to go to the bathroom, right? I've got to get some food or whatever the thing is, right? Or the other person, the client, they need to, go to their job or whatever it may be. So, I think there's something about, and there's nothing special about it being, an hour or whatever, right? Like that's just the structure of how I do my sessions. But there's that principle of we are letting things matter and we're setting limits, right? And so it really is both, so there was a phrase from years back, like love and limits. So that, I think that can be a similar kind of idea here. So like we need to have a love and compassion for our emotions. We need to respect that they have important things to tell us, and we need to be suspicious that they're not necessarily telling us what we might at first blush think, right? Like that we need to spend some time with them and get to know them of like, well, what is this actually about? Maybe, what my shame is telling me about me isn't actually true. Maybe what my shame is telling me about someone else is not actually true, right? All of these kinds of nuances. And that of itself is, I guess, a part of limit setting, right? Like that ability to say, I trust you, but not in all things, right? Like, I trust that you're important and that you matter. And, like, I also trust that, like, we got to spend some time together to tease out, like, what exactly do you mean, emotion, right? If I could personify it, thinking about emotions as parts here, so to speak. It's like I've got to, and I want to be careful about just jumping to like, well, I feel this, and so therefore, it's like, be very careful about the therefores, right? And say all I can know there is that I'm feeling something, and I don't actually know for certain what it means about other people or even about me. So, anyways, I think I'm reiterating in various ways. But I hope that you find this helpful. I hope that it can both clarify some things and maybe, kind of stir up some conversations with yourself in terms of emotions that maybe you've been ignoring or emotions that maybe you've been letting drive when they don't have their driver's license, right? Like emotions that you need to say, you know what? Not right now. Like we will spend some more time working on this, but like I'm going to try to make this decision from a different place in me. And again, that can be easier said than done, right? Like there can be lots of work that goes on there. So if you are someone who is on either end of the continuum there, if you're finding it really hard to access your emotions, or if you're finding you have a great difficulty in setting limits on your emotions, both of those are examples where it's like, it would be really good to find somebody to work with. It doesn't have to be a counselor, but just somebody who has more emotional skill and capacity than you do. And they're going to have more nuance than just, always agreeing or disagreeing with you, right? But they're going to can really kind of feel into the subtleties with you of like what's going on with your emotions and where is healing needed and and what are your emotions trying to tell you about your present, but especially about your past. So, well, until next time, peace be with you.